Hello, everyone. Good evening from Singapore, or good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Arif Jamal. I am the Vice Dean of Graduate Studies here at the Faculty of Law at NUS Law School. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, which is focusing on our graduate programs. I should say at the beginning that we have 3 graduate programs at NUS Law School. We have our PhD program, our LLM or Master of Laws programs, and our newest, which is our JD program. Today we're going to be highlighting our JD program, but we are happy to answer any questions you might have about the other programs, and in particular with our master's programs, there's a lot of information on our website that you can access. It's my pleasure also now to introduce the other members of today's panel. With us, we have our Dean, Professor Simon Chesterman, on my direct right, on my immediate right. Next to Professor Chesterman, we have Professor David Tan, who's the director of the JD, or Juris Doctor program. And next to Professor Tan, we have Tan Kangmin, who's one of the students in our JD program and who's here to give a student perspective on how the program is and what her experiences are. What we are going to do today by way of procedure is that we will start with some words of welcome by Professor Chesterman. Then Professor Tan will talk a little bit about the JD program. Kangmin will then share some of her experiences. And finally, we'll have time for questions and answers, which I will moderate. And we have approximately 1 hour's time. So without further ado, let me hand it over to our Dean, Professor Simon Chesterman, and ask him to give his words of welcome. Dean.
Thank you so much, Arif, and welcome to everyone who's taking part in this webinar or watching it on recording. So yes, my name's Simon Chesterman. I have the great honor of being Dean of NUS. And as you will have seen from the logos around us, we're the National University of Singapore, but we also style ourselves as Asia's Global Law School. And that reflects the 3 discrete identities that we have and that contribute to what it means to be an NUS law student. So first, we're the National Law School. For a long time, we were the only law school at the National University of Singapore. We produce a plurality of Singapore's lawyers, and our alumni include the Chief Justice, the Attorney General, the Minister of Law, and so on and so forth. So that national role is very important. But we're also an Asian law school. Our connections to the region are deeply important to our academic program here, and our collaborations with partners around the region and beyond are incredibly important also in terms of our research output. At the same time, we also aspire to being a global law school, one of the best law schools in the world. And that's important to me and my colleagues in terms of the profile of our research, but it's especially important for our students and our graduates, because when you drill down into it, the reason we do well in rankings globally is only partly because of the work that I and my colleagues do. The main factor that actually drives our ranking success is the reputation among employers of our graduates. And so that becomes a wonderfully self-fulfilling prophecy that our graduates go out and do good things, which then creates opportunities for the future graduates to come, and hopefully is one of the reasons why you're looking at coming here. So why should you think about doing graduate study? Well, the graduate program is integral to our work here. The JD, the LLM, the PhD are integral parts of the academic program, and in many cases also overlaps with the research activities here. There are opportunities for graduate students not just to get involved in the classroom, but also in the research activities. We have a vibrant research culture. We're regularly having high-level academic events and professional events that we will involve our graduate students in, which creates opportunities not just to learn, but to make connections and possibly to develop your career aspirations. So why are you thinking about graduate studies? Well, there might be one of, say, 3 different reasons. For some of you, it might be a professional shift, either to get a new qualification as a JD, either because it's your first law degree or you want to get a qualification to practice in Singapore, or perhaps you want to do an LLM in order to develop a specialization. You want to pivot to doing intellectual property and information technology, or international and comparative law, or some other area of law. So there might be those professional reasons. You might be looking to upgrade. You might be looking to build on your own legal education, not just with a professional eye, but in terms of the branding of the law school, and that you like the opportunities that NUS might create for you. These are both good reasons. You might also be just looking for an opportunity for personal growth, a pivot in your career, an opportunity to spend a year doing things because you're interested in them, choosing subjects not just because they'll help your career, although we hope they will, but because there'll be an opportunity to explore sides of yourself that you haven't been able to do up until now. So as I often tell our students when they're coming in, particularly the graduate students, by all means choose subjects that will help your careers, but also choose subjects that are just things that you're interested in, because often graduate study is your last opportunity to do things just because you're interested in them. And that goes for the other reasons why I hope you would think about studying with us at NUS, not just for the academic program, although it's rigorous and we'll be talking about that, but because it's just a wonderful place to live and work. Singapore itself is a wonderful microcosm that really epitomizes the value of the rule of law. The reason why law is so important to Singapore is it's a small jurisdiction that has profited enormously from prioritizing the rule of law, both in terms of the way in which Singapore operates internally, but also externally, that Singapore benefits from a world governed by law, which enables all of the other aspects of the economy that are so important, whether it's trade, finance, and so on. So all these reasons might be reasons to think about studying law and possibly doing it at Singapore, but why NUS in particular? So sometimes it's because we're ranked highly. That's something we obviously benefit from, although as I've already said, that's really linked to the quality of the students that come in and go out and do great things, but also because of the faculty. We can't all be here at today's webinar, but if you look through our website, you'll see that we have an amazing breadth and depth of faculty. We offer 100+ electives, which is among the highest of any comparable law school in the world. And that's possible partly because of the way we structure the degree, but also because we've got an amazing bunch of men and women who are on the faculty offering their expertise and sharing their knowledge with students. You also have an amazing campus. This campus, and I'm sorry you aren't here today, but hopefully you can do the virtual campus tour and then come here in person. We're in a historic heritage-listed building that's nestled next to the edge of the Botanic Gardens, Singapore's first World Heritage listed site. So it is simply a stunning location. It's a wonderful place to spend a year or more if you come here as a student. But also, in addition to all of these activities, I hope you would think about coming here to have fun, to have a life, to get involved in student activities. We've been reworking the master's program, particularly as we transition out of the pandemic, so that our students get all the opportunities that they need in the classroom, all the opportunities for professional development, but also opportunities to get to know each other, to get to know our undergraduates, to participate in the research life of the university, but also to take part in extracurricular activities, club activities that will form part of a rich graduate experience for all of you. So thank you for joining us today. You have, I know, no shortage of Zoom calls or webinars to tune into. And so I'm going to end here primarily because I want to leave time to answer questions and to have a bit of backwards and forwards in terms of what life at NUS might mean for you, both professionally and personally. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dean Chesterman. So let me now turn to Professor David Tan, the director of our JD program, and ask him to say a few words about that program. David.
I'm Professor David Tan. I lead the Juris Doctor program. The program was launched in 2020, and we got our first cohort in the year 2021. I'm sure you're interested in what the acceptance rate is like. It's about 15%. So we put the shortlisted candidates through a written test and an interview. And then we put the scores together, and then we make an offer on that basis, as well as taking into account your qualifications, so your work experiences. Some of you might be technopreneurs, some might be doctors, and the age range, in fact, it's from 23 to someone in their mid-40s. So we do take in a very wide range of candidates for the JD program. Why would you want to do a JD program compared to an LLM? The LLM does not allow you to practice Singapore law in Singapore, but the JD program is designed for you to practice law in Singapore, so it qualifies you to take the bar exams in Singapore. We have a 2-year JD program as well as a 3-year JD program. Kangmin, who's here, will tell you a little bit about the 2-year JD program, which he's enrolled in at the moment. But what I want to tell you here is that the 2-year JD program is for someone who already has a law degree, perhaps from a civil law jurisdiction like Germany, France, or China, but that degree does not allow you to practice law in Singapore. So you would then enroll in the 2-year JD program at NUS, where upon completion, you can then qualify for the bar exam as a qualified person. The 3-year JD program is for someone who perhaps has a degree in chemistry, psychology, political science, the languages, whatever it might be. You already have a university degree. You spend a few years working somewhere else, and you decided you want to try out the practice of law. So you would then enroll in the 3-year JD program. So some students have decided very quickly after graduation from, say, NYU, we have a student from NYU, who then says, well, I really want to practice law in Singapore, and then immediately you can apply, and you might start the 3-year JD at the age of 23 or 24, compared to someone who might have been a doctor for 10 years, and then said, okay, now I want a LLB or a JD in addition to an MBBS. So we do accept a wide range of candidates. I think one thing that sets our JD apart from perhaps some of our competitors across the region is that it is plugged very closely into our LLM specializations. If you've looked at our website, you'd realize that we offer a number of specializations in the LLM program, such as IP and technology law, international arbitration and dispute resolution, or maritime law. So the JD students can take a number of electives, somewhere between 4 to 7, depending whether you're in the 2-year or the 3-year program, from these clusters. So although you don't have a major or a specialization that's tagged to your JD degree, you can still specialize in these areas, which might be useful to you in practice. You might decide, I want to be a banking lawyer, and then in working through your JD program, you decide to choose all your subjects in corporate and financial services law. Alternatively, if you can't decide what kind of law you want to practice, you just know you want to practice law, you can choose from a very wide range of over 100 electives to supplement the core compulsories of tort, contract that we will teach you in the JD program to get you ready for practice. So perhaps at this point, I might let current student Kangmin tell you a little bit more about what she's in fact gleaned from her first year of study at NUS.
Thank you, David. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Kangmin, and I'm currently a student in a 2-year JD program. Perhaps I will start a little bit about my background information. What was I doing before this? So I actually obtained a law degree from a private university in Malaysia before this. And after that, I actually went to the United Kingdom to do my bar professional training course. I completed my BPTC. I returned to Malaysia, and I was actually practicing as a lawyer in Malaysia for a number of years. During my time in Malaysia, I was actually working on a number of files that are closely related to Singapore law issues and Singapore parties. And a few years later, I decided to move to Singapore, and I'm very lucky to join one of the local law firms in Singapore as a foreign associate. So during my time here, I'm actually deeply impressed with the standard of legal services and the quality of lawyers in Singapore. And I aspire to build my legal career in Singapore. And that's when JD became an easy decision for me, and I decided to join NUS. Why NUS? Many of you might be thinking about the different options, different law school in Singapore. Perhaps I could summarize why did I choose NUS in 3 points. There are various reasons, and first of all, the most obvious reason is this: as all of us knows, NUS is the top top law school in Singapore, as Asia top law school, and you can be assured that you will actually be taught by very good lecturers. And not only that, what I find it really very enlightening is you will have very experienced legal practitioners who will be teaching you. And for some of the legal elective subjects, you will also be taught by lecturers from top universities in the world, including Harvard and Oxford. And the second reason why I chose NUS is this, and I would say that this is the most important reason. So I'm a student from the 2-year JD course, and I think NUS is the only law school in Singapore that officially offer a 2-year JD course for someone who has a basic law degree like myself. And if you are aspired to actually build a legal career in Singapore and you want to be qualified to practice in Singapore, this 2-year JD course provide you a shorter pathway to achieve this course, to achieve this goal. And now I go to the third reason why did I choose NUS. As what have been mentioned by David earlier, there is really very extensive elective that you can select, and actually it does help you a lot because you can actually try to see what you want to focus on in your legal career, and you can actually pursue your specific interests, refine your interests, and also help you to craft a personalized degree that actually suit your needs. So perhaps I will also share a little bit more about my experience being a student in NUS. I'm going to be very honest, it is very challenging. The course is rigorous, it's intensive, it requires a lot of hard work, and you have to be very committed. Having said that, I must say that I have been really enjoying all the fresh perspective, diverse perspective facilitated by top caliber faculty members in NUS, and the multinational student intake is something that I particularly enjoy. So 7 months into this course, I must say that I have actually encountered many fresh perspectives, and I must also say that I'm surprised how much my horizon has been broadened, having encountered and having all the discussions with my classmates. As you know that many of the two-year students are actually from different jurisdictions, and some of them are actually qualified lawyers from the civil law jurisdictions from China, from Korea, from Italy. So it has been very fascinating and enlightening to have all these exchanges with my fellow classmates.
Thank you. Before we turn to more general questions, I just wanted to ask you one question to start off with, which is a question that perhaps some of the people on the webinar will have. If you had to give some advice to a prospective graduate student, whether they're a JD student or an LLM student, or something interested in an LLM program, what advice would you give them?
Sure. I will say that be mentally prepared. This is going to be hard. This is not easy. The workload is very heavy. Being someone who have worked in a law firm, I will tell you, this is no less challenging than working in a law firm because it's very intensive. But at the same time, I assure you that it is very intellectually stimulating and fun as well. So I thought very hard before this session, what could I actually share with the prospective students who are going to join the JD program. I think my little secret or motto is this. I think there are 3 P's I'm going to share. P's. P stand for perseverance, presence, and positivity. Why do I say that? Because for perseverance, as you start the course, you will realize that this is really not easy. You have to be very determined and very committed, especially when you come back to this after several years of working, like myself. And don't give up just yet. Think about why did you join? What are you trying to achieve? And be perseverant about this. And being present means try to engage in all your classes, all your seminars. Be as prepared as possible for every classes. Engage, discuss, be prompt, talk to your classmates, talk to your lecturers. I assure you that you are in very good hands. Most of the lecturers are very helpful. They are very good. They are always there to guide you. I'm sure they will guide you through this whole journey. And the last point, positivity. I'm sure this it's not something easy, which I'm still struggling and trying to cope every day. I'm in my second semester now. I will not be shy to say that sometimes I feel like giving up. Why did I stop working and come to this? But be positive. You might not do as well as what you have wished for, but you just have to be persistent and keep going. You will sail through this. This is what I believe, at least for now.
Thanks, Kangmin. Let me turn to some questions that have come in now. David, perhaps I can put two questions to you that I think are related. One is JD specific, which is on the size of the cohort. So the question is about the size of the cohort. The other one is about the curriculum, and it's asking whether how much space there is. Does the faculty design the curriculum, or does the student get to choose? Perhaps you could address that both in terms of the JD program as well as the LLMs.
Yeah, sure. I'll just start with the easier one, which is how big the JD cohort is. The estimated size is about 40 each intake. With the first intake, we're a lot more selective. We took in about 20, but I think the steady state will admit around 40. Regarding the curriculum, in the LLM, if you want to do a specialization, more than half, which is, I would say, about 60% needs to be from a particular subject cluster in order for you to get that specialization. So for instance, if you're interested in IP and technology law, then you have to do copyright law, law of IP, patent law, biotech law, etc., and chalk up about 60% of your total credits in order to get the specialization. And then the remainder would be unrestricted electives. So if you decide to do public international law, you can, in addition to subjects in your specialization. The JD is a lot more prescriptive. That's because we are training you for practice in Singapore. So for the 2-year JD, at least 80% of your modules are from a core compulsory cluster, which means you don't get to choose. You have to do tort, contract, property, company, constitution, administrative law, criminal law, and so all that's prescribed. But then you still have some space to do 4 to 5 electives. For the 3-year JD program, about 2/3 are from the compulsory modules, leaving you about space for 7 to 8 electives. Yeah, so the curriculum is designed to ensure that you do enough to be admitted to practice and law for the JD, and for the LLM to ensure you do enough to get your specialization for your LLM.
Thank you, David. Simon, one question that had come in was about thinking about general versus specialized LLMs. How would you advise prospective students who are still trying to decide whether they want to do a general or a specialized LLM?
Right. So, I mean, as David said, there are competing requirements, and eventually you do have to choose. But the way in which you make that choice partly depends what you want to get out of the degree. And so if you're thinking about a specialization, then that's a kind of signal to the market that you want to dive deep into maritime law, IP and IT, international and comparative law, for example. And so when we have the welcome event, we usually go through the specializations and welcome them, acknowledge that they're going to be sort of focusing on these areas. And then I usually leave until last the general LLM. And I say, you guys are the smartest because you can choose from anything. You'll still get the NUS LLM, exactly the same LLM degree, but you get to choose from the whole range of electives. There's 100+ electives that we offer. And so you can put together a degree specialization that suits you. And it might or might not have the parentheses after the LLM, but it really is up to you to co-create that curriculum. Whereas the JD, as David was saying, is more geared towards practice. The LLM is really geared towards your interests. And so on the question of choice, yeah, work out what you want to get out of the degree and what you think will help you. There is some scope for switching later on, and if you satisfy the credits, you can get the specialization. But I would encourage you to think broadly. Candidly, when we were setting these up, we did have a discussion whether, for example, someone who's doing banking and finance law should be forced to do a human rights module as well, or someone who wants to do maritime law should have to do Asian legal studies or things like that to force people out of their comfort zones. We don't require that, but we really do encourage it. And so when people do actually enroll, I really encourage people to choose subjects, yes, based on their professional interests, but also just based on your personal interest or based on a professor who you're interested in learning more from. Because again, your graduate degree, whether it's the JD, the LLM, or indeed the PhD, is potentially the last time in your life you're doing things just out of interest. And so I really hope that people will take advantage of that and do things that will give them a rich year, not just in the professional sense, but also in that personal sense.
Thanks, Simon. David, a couple of questions for you, and then I have one for Kangmin as well. So 2 questions, one slightly more technical and one more general. The technical question is, can one switch between the LLM and JD programs? And the second one, more broad, is what makes a good applicant? And that maybe you can answer, what makes a good applicant for the JD program, or what makes a good applicant for the LLM program?
All right. I should charge fees for this.
Yeah.
First, switching, I think no, because at the point of application, it's quite different, the sort of qualities we look out for. So for instance, when you apply for the LLM, you either get in or you don't. You're not shortlisted for a written test or an interview. For the JD, you are shortlisted in the first instance for the written test and the interview, and then that would determine whether or not you get an offer. Just to give you an example, for the last cohort, we shortlisted about half the applicants for the JD program, for the written test and the interview, and then ultimately we offered only to about a third who went through the written test and interview. So it's quite a different process because we look out for different competencies between the LLM and the JD. And therefore, you can't switch between the 2 programs. You just have to decide which one at the onset. And maybe I just want to just add a little bit more in addition to the questions. It's how we bring in practitioners, about 24 to 30 of them. These are adjuncts, and they run clinical programs like a lot of the American JDs that some of you might be familiar with. And these modules are open to both LLM and the JDs. So I think one of the advantages that we have at NUS Law is how the JD students and the LLM students do the electives together, as well as with the LLB students. So you get quite a richness and diversity in the class. And it also allows us to bring in, I think as Kangmin mentioned, visiting professors from Oxford or Harvard on a 3-week basis, running 27-hour intensives. And then we have clinical programs with, say, the Ministry of Law or the Attorney General's Chambers, and even the Intellectual Property Office of Singapore, where the Director of Mediation, for instance, will be running an IP arbitration modules for LLM, JD, and LLB students. So in summary, I would say no, you can't switch, but then you end up sort of having this richness of everyone getting together and sharing their different experiences in the classroom.
Thank you, David. There are a couple of questions that came in that I will just quickly address now, and then a question for Kangmin. So one question that came in earlier was about the size of the JD program. So it's sort of over 100. We vary from about 120 to about 150 students per year.
The LLM.
I beg your pardon, the LLM program, excuse me, size of the LLM program. And that is over 100 students, and it varies from about 120 to 150 students a year. So that there's some variation there. And the other question was about practice in Singapore. Can you practice with an LLM degree? So just to be clear, it's the JD degree that allows you to qualify to practice in Singapore. The LLM degrees do not allow that. Kangmin, a question that I want to address to you that's come in, well, a more general question about the integration of graduate students into the life of the law school. So, graduate students also want to participate in the law school. Do you feel that as graduate students are, integrated into the various activities in the law school?
I would say that you can do that if you want to, but just bear in mind that this graduate program, it is not going to be a very easy program that gives you a lot of time to do a lot of things. Of course, you have to be very disciplined. You have to manage your time well. But when you decide to join this course, please be mentally prepared that it is a very heavy workload program. If you are thinking of having fun and not studying very much, this is not for you. But if you want something intellectually challenging and you want fresh perspective, you want invigorating discussion and debates with your lecturers or classmates, this is for you. So yeah, do think twice. But I assure you that it is going to be rewarding. At least that's what I feel at the moment.
And what about the idea of part-time working?
To be very honest, as I understand, NUS does not prohibit a student from joining from doing any part-time job. But personally, from my experience, I would actually discourage that. As I have mentioned many times, you will have very heavy workload. If you really need to work, you have to be very disciplined. It is going to be very challenging to juggle between work and the course. You will be expected to spend at least, I think, 40 to 60 hours a week to attend classes, to keep up with your reading. And like what I said earlier, this is actually a marathon, it's not a sprint. You have to be very persistent, keep up with your study from day one, and that is the only way that you can survive, enjoy, and also learn something from the course. You don't want to be working and studying and suffering at the same time, and you won't be enjoying your life as a student as well.
Thank you.
That's my piece of advice.
Thank you.
I might just jump in here because Kavya and I, we've talked quite a bit. We say that the JD and the LLM are full-time degree programs, but at the same time, we understand some people have financial commitments and they need to work. But just to give you a sense of the time commitment, for each 3-hour seminar, we do run things on a seminar basis for most modules. For 3-hour seminar, you're meant to put in 7 hours of reading. And this works out to approximately, as Kangmin said, 40 to 50 hours of reading plus class attendance time a week. So if you can squeeze in family time plus your work hours, by all means, but most students, I would say at least 90% of the students, current JD program do find it very challenging to try to do that.
Thanks, David. Dean Chesterman, 2 questions for you. Can students attend in either the JD or LLM program? Can they do these online in the world of webinars and Zoom, or must they be in Singapore? And what do you think are the career prospects that are open for LLM graduates?
Yeah, so I mean, like everyone else around the world, we've been forced by the pandemic to embrace the opportunities of technology, but it's really our last resort. We firmly believe at NUS that an in-person education, I would say absolutely for an undergraduate degree. There are arguments you could make about a graduate degree, but the quality of the JD, in particular the LLM experience, I think is much greater when people are here in person, in the classroom, and that's only partly because of what actually happens in the classroom. It's also because of what happens on the margins. So Kangmin's being very disciplined, saying it's all work. It's not no play, but it's all work plus a bit of play, I would say. And so the advice I give people is, by all means, work very, very hard, but also play hard. Do try and get to know other students. Do those things on the margins of classes. Take part in campus life outside of your education, because that's a big part of what a university is. It is extremely hard to do that online. And so although, as I said, the pandemic has forced us to allow students who couldn't come into the country, we've always been accommodating. If for COVID reasons they couldn't come into the country, we've allowed them to participate remotely. My colleagues have been incredibly adaptable. Or if they're here and they're required to be at home, or if they're quarantined, we've allowed them Zoom options. But our strong preference, and indeed our expectation moving forwards, is that we go back to 100% in-person classes, at least for these degree programs. Some of our continuing education activities are going to remain online with an online option, and we're debating whether we should extend that further. But certainly for the period you're looking at, you should plan on being here in person, and that's a good thing, because that's a big part of the experience. What about job prospects? So as I hope we're very clear, the JD enables you to become a Singapore qualified lawyer. The LLM does not, but that doesn't mean you can't work as a lawyer in Singapore. It does mean, however, that it's a little bit more challenging. So, for example, we have had Indian students who've gone on to set up Indian branches of law firms in Singapore. We've had Chinese qualified lawyers or lawyers with qualifications from other jurisdictions who work for multinational firms, leveraging their international expertise. And we've had people who've moved into in-house counsel type position. So there are opportunities, but the LLM does not give you that right to practice or indeed the right to work in Singapore, which is subject to usual immigration restrictions. So why should you do an LLM? Well, it goes back to the reasons I highlighted earlier. Professional qualification, upgrading of your qualification, and the development of personal skills that will serve you well should you work in Singapore, but also if you go out into the market, the reason why NUS does so well in rankings is the global reputation of our law graduates. And so, as I often tell our alumni, we have, of course, people within Singapore's legal luminaries. Most of them, indeed, are our alumni. But we also have partners in law firms in New York, London, Hong Kong, Shanghai, who are NUS Law undergraduate or graduate alumni. And so by completing a degree here, you would be joining those ranks.
Thank you. David, a couple of questions have come in. Well, one question is about applications. So I want to put that to you. And the questions are really about when we're looking at or assessing applicants, some of the questioners are worried that, they may not come from a very sort of strong LLB background if they're applying for an LLM, or even if they're applying for the JD. Would that be a problem? Are we concerned about the ranking of the LLBs? And then one question has come more specifically on the JDs is about any financial support or scholarships that might be available to help JD study.
Sure. I'll address the first one. For the LLM program, we do look at where your first degree is from, and I think that's very important. It doesn't mean if you're from a smaller jurisdiction, we look sort of less favorably on, I think there's a question, someone from Algeria. We had accepted someone from Kazakhstan, and you can read more about his profile on our website. And we do look at what you call whole person qualities, what you've done since graduation. Are you from the top university in your home country? All that's really important at the shortlisting process. For the JD in particular, I go through every single application personally. I read everything in your file, including your English test results and whether you scored more highly in the written part compared to the listening part. And then ultimately, we do make a decision. So you will not be prejudiced if you're from a smaller country. The second question about financial support is we do have some scholarships for the LLM program, but not at this point for the JD program. I think there's some comments on the JD fees perhaps being expensive, but if you want to get into a top 10 law school, I think we're great value for money. The LLM's about 38,000 a year, I think. That is a lot less than some of the American law schools. If you look at some of the American law schools, which are ranked not in the top 10, but in the next 10 or the next 20, they cost about 50,000 Singapore dollars. We cost 38,000 per year. So, and we're ranked a lot higher. So immediately you can say, hey, that's great value for money. Secondly, the JD program for the 3-year JD, if you take 1 year full fees, 38,000 times 3, you get 114,000. So we, in fact, given you a discount, if you did the 3-year program, we charge a program fee of just about 80,000. Rather than go the full 100,000 at this point in time. So I would say, good value for money. You're coming to a top-rate law school. You get to practice in a very safe and secure jurisdiction like Singapore as a seat of international arbitration at the same time. So do take all that into account rather than focus on how much it costs for an education at NUS.
Thank you. Simon, one for you, and then one I'll direct to kangmin. I'll begin with you. So one question sometimes is, what next? And I think some of this is coming from the LLM students in terms of looking for jobs. What does the faculty do to provide sort of support or networking to help students looking for opportunities after the LLM?
Yeah, thanks. And this goes to the point that David, I think, was quite rightly being candid about. We understand this is an expensive program. They're all expensive programs. If you're looking at the PhD actually does come with heavy subsidies and support. That tends to be a narrower set of students interested in that. You can find out a lot more information, or you can add in a question if you are interested in the PhD. But the LLM and the JD both have big sticker prices. Both in terms of the dollar cost, and we appreciate that, and as David's saying, we try to make it worthwhile. We realize that this is a program that people are paying money for, and that they want high quality education. That's what my colleagues and I strive to offer. But it's also a cost in terms of opportunity cost. You're giving up a year, 2 years, potentially 3 years of your life if you do the 3-year JD. How do you evaluate that? How do you cost that in? And so again, we have a real interest in making sure that your time here is valuable. But then what happens afterwards? Well, as I've said a couple of times, I think, the value of an NUS education, the reason we are ranked highly, is where our graduates go. So we don't just send them off into the wild and say, well, good luck, I hope you find a job somewhere. We have a real interest, we have a vested interest in ensuring that you do well. So we have career support, we have a Centre for Future Ready Graduates, we have soft skills trainings, we have opportunities for you to meet people from the profession, we have a job fair where we want to expose you to employers but also help give you skills, because candidly, the NUS degree might get you an interview, but what you do in the interview is then what gets you the job. And so again, we want to train you not just so that you get the degree that gets you into the interview, we want to help give you the opportunity to develop those soft skills that will enable you to get the job, to succeed, and to go on to do great things for which we might then just take a tiny little bit of credit and maybe call on you to share that experience back with our students. And that maybe is the last point I'll make on this. The alumni network of NUS, because we've got this 6 decades of experience and network around the world, I tell our alumni they can support us in at least 3 ways. The first way is to just go out and do great things, for which we then want to sort of say that that's one of our alumni. The second thing, and many people are receptive to this, is to come back, to give advice, to offer internships, to offer opportunities to our students. And many of our graduates are willing to do that. And the NUS alumni networks around the world can be a way of doing that. And then thirdly, and I wouldn't be a dean if I didn't say this, our alumni can support us financially. So if you think, for example, that it's a shame we don't have more JD scholarships, that's what I'll reach out to our alumni and ask them to fund. So for all these reasons, we do really have an interest, not just in making sure people have a rich experience on campus, but also go on to fulfilling careers afterwards.
Thank you. There was one question that I'll just briefly mention about accommodation options at NUS, and certainly there are accommodation options, particularly for students that are coming from overseas. There are many housing options on the university campus, so that's something that a lot of our international students do take up. Kangmin, a question for you is about non-study activities. They're asking, are there clubs and other things that graduate students can get involved in at the law school and at the university more generally?
I think apart from studies, there are actually a number of clubs that the NUS students can join. So perhaps I might have emphasized a bit too much about hard work. I apologize about that. Out of studying, I'm also doing a lot of other things. I particularly love dancing. I exercise. I run a lot. And we have a very beautiful campus that you can actually exercise, you can run, and there's like tennis court. So don't worry, it is a lot of hard work, but you can also play very hard at the same time. So don't worry about being too stressed out on study itself, because there are actually a lot of other things you can do. There are like dancing clubs, and there are all sorts of different societies that you can actually join if you want to. Again, this is a personal choice. You can always pick up whatever you are interested in. And there's just one point that I would want to touch on. It's something that we talked about earlier on online studies and online classes. I thought that I could share something from a student perspective about doing classes online or being physically present in school. I would say that, trust me, you will actually enjoy the experience a lot more if you come to school, because the JD course actually require a lot of participations. You will notice and you will learn later that many of the seminar classes, the tutorial sessions, you will have to talk to your tutor, you have to discuss with your classmates, and it is simply more enjoyable when you are physically here and you can discuss about your assignments, your tutorial questions, your presentation slides. So as a student, I would encourage that you come here to meet your tutors, to meet your friends, your cohort. That will actually really enhance the whole experience.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to say, I mean, whether different sports clubs or other interest groups, there are lots at the university generally. A couple of questions, David, that I'll pose to you. They're comparative questions. So they are asking first about, this is more specifically about the LLM program, asking about the NUS LLM program compared to LLM programs in other Asian jurisdictions, and they specifically mentioned HKU, so if you could talk a little bit about that. And the other is a comparative question about the JD, and asking about the NUS JD versus the SMU JD. So,
okay, okay. I'll start with the LLM. I think the way you would choose an LLM degree in Asia is to decide first. I think it's quite different from the JD, where you decide you want to practice in a particular jurisdiction, then you go to that country. So if you want to practice Singapore law in Singapore, then you do the JD in Singapore, then you decide between, say, SMU and NUS. But for the LLM, it's really how it fits into your career path. Are you going to be an academic? Are you going to go back to legal practice? And therefore, the LLM sort of gives you the leg up, you get a promotion when you go back. Two Swiss students from about 5-6 years ago, and they became great friends of mine. I said, why did you come all the way from Switzerland and not to the UK or the US for an LLM? They said, we Googled best law school in Asia, and NUS popped up, and that's why they're here. But more seriously, they said, if you want to learn how to do business in Asia, in a jurisdiction that has been looked up by the rest of the world as of a sterling standard, in corporate commercial law, you will come to Singapore. And I think that's going to be quite different from HKU, where there's a closer focus with China. So if you're more interested in how to do business with China, learning about civil law of China and how it interacts with common law of Hong Kong, then an LLM at HKU would sort of give you that particular focus. While Singapore gives you a broader transnational comparative focus in its LLM program. Kangmin can tell you more about, say, the kind of electives that really demonstrate also the strengths of our LLM, because she has access to that in the JD. As to why you choose SMU versus NUS, I think Kangmin had mentioned, if you already have a law degree, we give you that 2-year JD, which SMU currently does not. SMU said you could accelerate a 3-year JD into 2.5 years. But then at the onset, we said you can save a good proportion of your time, a chunk of your time, by immediately going into a 2-year JD program. And then as to 3-year JD at NUS versus 3-year JD at SMU, I think you should just look at the curriculum and see if that's for you. SMU have, I suppose, maybe half the electives that we have. So if electives are very important to you, there's certain electives you might want to do, say in tax law or in criminal law or in public international law that NUS offer and SMU doesn't, that might sway you to choose NUS over SMU. Or if you're simply looking at rankings, then you might want to go to law school with a higher ranking and then choose NUS over SMU. So it's really up to you what you're looking for in terms of choosing a JD, because both would allow you to qualify for practice in Singapore.
If I can just add in on the Master of Laws, I think David's right. I mean, if you really want to do a Master of Laws that focuses on China, then maybe you could do it at Hong Kong University or indeed at Beida, Tsinghua, Shanghai Jiao Tong or Fudan. But you can, of course, do a degree at NUS that gives you both Singapore and China. Our international business law program is 1 semester in Singapore, 1 semester in Shanghai. So for people who are particularly interested in China, and want to spend serious time on the ground in China, in the most financially dynamic and exciting city in China, in Shanghai, assuming things open up, and we're cautiously confident that they will, then our international business law program might be the program that you want to think about.
Thanks. Kangmin, a couple of questions. One actually that's inspired by the answer that David just gave, which is about the electives. Perhaps you could talk about what electives you're thinking about, or what you think about the access to the electives they have. But another one, really coming from a student perspective, is asking about what are the facilities like for students, particularly the studying facilities like. Could you address both of those, please?
Sure, I will start with the elective modules. As I have mentioned earlier, NUS really offer very extensive and relevant elective modules for the students. Say, for example, if you are someone who are looking at joining the 3-year JD course, perhaps you are currently an engineer or a quantity surveyor, there are very relevant electives that you could take up, like the construction law. They have also international projects and infrastructure. All these are going to be very relevant if you want to specialize in this. So, like I have already said earlier, it really gives you an opportunity, if you have not decided on what you want to do, to explore the legal areas that you want to pursue in your career, and also to help you refine your interests. I think this is a very rare opportunity because, as we know, once we start practice or once you go to the real world, it is not often up to you to decide which particular area of law that you can actually learn more about it. When you have files, you just have to work on what you get. So I think this is really the best opportunity for you to explore more, to learn more, and to decide what you want for your career. So I find this particularly helpful. This is really one of the reasons that makes NUS law very attractive, or the extensive modules for elective. And on the second point on facilities, I would say that as a student, what is very important for your study is the library. We do have a really good library with very good records and selection. You can basically get whatever you want. And I think what is also more important is the kind of support that you will get in the school, not just the facilities. I particularly find that most of the lecturers are very helpful, and they give good advice and good guidance. So that's something that you want to think about, because law study is not going to be easy. You want someone who are good and helpful and know what they are doing. So in NUS, you can be assured that you are in good hands. The lecturers will guide you along the way.
Excellent. David, a question about the way in which the teaching is done in the JD program. That the seminars or tutorials, the classes are going to be with LLB students, with LLM students. How does that work? What advantages does that bring, and how does that sort of manage?
Yeah, I will let Kangmin talk about the advantages.
Okay.
He's already doing criminal law with some of the undergraduates,
okay.
The LLB. But I'll just explain about the design of the JD program. In some classes, for example, the skills classes, the JDs, they do it as a cohort because we want that cohort experience. In some other classes, they are mingled with the LLB students to give them sort of more diverse worldview and perspectives. So let me give you an example with torts, for instance. You attend lectures with the JD students and the LLB students. But then when it comes to tutorials, and these are about 12 students to a class, the JD students are all together. And it's the same with contract as well. But when it comes to other modules like criminal law, which is then taught in a seminar style, purely seminars, you meet for 3 hours, 2 times a week, we mix the JD students with the LLB students. And I think that could be quite enjoyable from what Kangmin tells me. And maybe I'll just hand the ball over to her now.
Yeah, so I will talk a little bit about those modules that you will be doing together with the LLB student. That are the elective modules. I find that particularly interesting because you get the opportunity to see how the LLB students actually think differently, or the younger minds, and you get fresh perspective. And not just the LLB student, when you are doing your elective, you will also be doing it with the LLM students. So you are not just attending classes, you actually have to work together with them. Be assured that you will have your assignment presentations, you will talk to them, you will exchange your opinion, what do you think about the subject matter. I find that really very interesting, because that gives you the opportunity to not just interact with people from your cohort from the JD program, and you will also get the opportunity to actually mingle with the LLM or the LLB students. So for seminar style, David, actually for the criminal subject, you are doing it together with the JD cohort only, not with the LLB students. That is really good as well, because that is the opportunity that you get to mingle with the entire JD cohort. So for core subjects like contract law and torts, you will do it with your 2-year or 3-year cohort. And I find that very good as well, because you will be in a smaller groups. You will be involved in a lot of discussions. When the group is not so big, you get the opportunity to speak up your mind and to even challenge the lecturer if you want to, or challenge your classmates. So I like how all the different subjects are being structured in a very different way, where you get to learn things in different way and methods. So that makes the learning more interesting as well, I would say that.
Great.
Maybe I can just throw in something on the being alongside undergraduates, because occasionally we do have graduate students who say, why are we sitting alongside undergraduates? Because we're so much more experienced. But I have good news and better news. The good news is that the Singaporean students, our undergraduate students, are incredibly bright. Just recently in the news, the International Baccalaureate results came out. Half of the world's perfect scores were in Singapore. Singaporean students are frighteningly bright. They are incredible. And that brings me to the better news. You are not graded on a curve with them. You get all the benefits of being in the classroom with these bright young men and women, but you're not being judged against them. So you get that benefit of the diversity, but don't worry, you're not going to have to compete against them head to head, at least not until you're out in the practice world.
Thank you. Only a few minutes left, so maybe a couple more questions we'll try and take. First one, Simon, I'll direct to you. It is from somebody who's thinking about the LLM and thinking, if I come to Singapore and I spend 1 year there, can I get to know enough about Singapore and Singapore law in that year?
So that's a great question. We do encourage students when they come here, as I was saying earlier, and pushing back a bit against what Kangmin was saying about all work and no play. We do encourage people to get to know the city-state. And the good thing about Singapore is it's small, it's compact, you can get to know the country, you can get to know the people, it's a pretty open place. It's like one of those sort of global cities where there's a lot of people moving through, normal times permitting. And so I do think it's possible to get to know the city. We encourage people, go down to the courts. The courts are usually open. You can get to know our alumni will routinely come through for events. We have careers seminars. So yeah, we have a real interest in getting people exposed to Singapore, to the legal system. And candidly, that's one reason why I think the government also really supports NUS, and our mission here is partly for the work we do to produce lawyers in Singapore, but also because people who've spent time in Singapore and then go back home or to another country usually go away thinking pretty highly of Singapore and become friends and ambassadors of Singapore in that way.
Thank you. And perhaps this could be the last question, since there's only a couple of minutes left. For David, a couple of questions, actually more about the LLM program. One question is about the International Business Law LLM that was mentioned earlier, with Shanghai, ECUPL in Shanghai and Singapore. So is that structured differently from the other LLM programs? Mm-hmm. And one participant who's particularly keen on the Maritime Law program is saying, what do we look for in a good applicant for the Maritime Law program?
I should be paid for all of it. I'm not even the director of the LLM program, but I'll do my best to answer. With the Shanghai program, this is with ECUPL. You spend the first semester at NUS, and then you spend the second semester in Shanghai at ECUPL. I think that 6 months residency does qualify you to be called to the Shanghai bar. So that's something you need to verify. But I think when we designed the program about 10 years ago, it's really to allow students to be able to end up practicing in Shanghai, but then having the benefit of some common law education in Singapore at NUS, and then going to Shanghai, doing a number of different intensive modules that include, say, mergers and acquisitions, IP, or tort law, and tax law as well. And I think this is something that you really should consider. We do have, I think, a number of Europeans who, in fact, so enjoyed this experience. They haven't had enough of the civil law training, and then they want to continue that in Singapore and China. With the maritime law, I think the way we admit students is the same as all the other LLM programs. There's a certain scoring system where we look at your personal statement, your results, your previous LLB degree, and then we make an offer on the basis. So you do not need to be a practitioner within the maritime law industry. So it's the same as if you were going to apply for the international arbitration or the IP specialization.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is all the time we have left. So it falls to me just to thank you for participating and to thank all the panelists participating, and to let you know that if you want any further information about our graduate programs, you can write to us after this webinar, and please look out for the email address, which will be shown on the final screen. So from all of us here, thank you very much.